Hi everyone, and welcome to part 5 of my tutorial on how to build, paint and weather the interior of a Stug III Ausf D. It's all basically been stripped out now, ready for painting. First off, I used a fiberglass pen to get rid of all the glue stains and some of the other mess that was in there. These are great things. My only recommendation is that you do make sure you have gloves on when you use these, because the little bits of fiberglass can get into your skin, and if possible use it with water. You'll find there's a lot less mess that way. Once it was done, it was all submerged into warm water and just given a clean off, and then finally I went round with lighter fuel and a cotton bud, just to make sure that everything was clean in all the recesses. So that was the cleaning process. The next stage before any paint went on was to use Mr. Metal primer, and obviously on all the metal parts. 2 coats were given of that. So now we're at the stage where the model is ready to have some paint, and the first stage will be to give everything a red undercoat, and this is what I'll be using, MRP Primer Red. So as you could tell from the stills, all the red primer is now done. MRP red primer is very good. It does go down very well. The only thing is this stuff does stink, so make sure you're in a well ventilated area, and try and use an old airbrush, because it is a bit of a bugger to get cleaned out afterwards, but well worth the hassle. So what we're now going to do is go on and look at the internal colours. This is always a subject of debate. Lots of different people have lots of different ideas. So the way I look at it is my build, so I'm going to be going with what colours I feel I want my interior to look like. So what we're going to do first is we're going to do the floor. For me, I'm going to be using blue-green for my floor colour. However, you'll find lots of varieties. You can just leave it as the red primer. As we'll look at later on, the main colour of the interior will be Elfenbein, which is the German equivalent to an off-white colour. Or you can have it white, or you could have the floor black, or even silver, steel, sorry. So your build, you choose which you feel the colour that looks right for yourself. To help create an authentic looking floor, I'm going to be doing chipping. I'm going to be using the Hairspray chipping technique, which basically involves using a standard any day type of hairspray, spraying it at arm's length, do a couple of sweeps, let that dry, and then do another couple of sweeps across, and then that will give you a nice covering. One of the advantages of doing that is, as you can see in this confined area, if there is any overspill of the blue-grey paint from the floor onto other areas that I'm not happy with, it can be easily removed, as though it's, I don't know, like a big chip or something like that. And then what the aim will be, once the paint is dried, I like to leave it for about an hour. I'll go along and on the raised areas, on the handles, etc., I'll just gently take off the blue-grey paint through the hairspray chipping technique, and that will reveal some of the red oxide underneath, which will make a nice effect. So after now's drying time, it's time to do some chipping on the floor. Really it's just a matter of picking out the areas where you think the most wear will be. So with this hobnail boots you'd expect quite a bit of wear there. You're going to have the loader over here, so he's going to be stood up quite a bit, so this particular area will be quite worn as well, and this whole area here where the driver would need to go down to his area, that will be quite worn as well. So the worn areas are going to be primarily in the middle, and the outer areas won't be so worn. So the paint's dried for an hour now, so I'm just adding a little bit of water. You can see it's an old cut down brush that I use, and this just starts to get the hairspray lifting from underneath the paint, which allows you to remove the paint and create that chipped effect. There we go, it's starting to lift off quite nicely. As you can see, we have some floor plates here. They'll be quite worn around the edges, so that will look quite good as well if that particular area is done. And always bear in mind, this is only the first of many stages that we'll go through to produce a nicely weathered floor. Now whenever you do a multi-coloured vehicle or project, one of the necessary evils is masking. As you can see, it's quite a patchwork of tape. The main ones that I use are Tamiya tape, which come in all various sizes. Very easy to use. I recommend that you cut the strips on a piece of glass, because it's a lot easier to pick up. Then using your tweezers, you can pick up and place and make sure that you have the straight lines to give you that nice finish once done. Now the next controversial colour we need to look at inside of the Stug is the Elfenbein Rao 1001. It's like a creamy off-white colour, and that's the main colour that was used on the walls and ceilings, and some people like to put it on the floors as well. Or you can go for white, a shade of white, like a white grey, or you can go for a slightly off-white, like an insignia white. I particularly like to go for aged white, purely and simply because it weathers quite nicely. So that's the colour that I'll be using for the interior. The next question is, whereabouts do you put it? And as you can see from the masking, I've made it quite clear that I'm going to be putting it along all the three side walls and the central console as well. Some people like to do the whole area completely, but I'm quite happy with the particular look on this build. So after the aged white had dried for an hour, it was just a matter of doing a little bit of chipping. Simple process, just getting yourself some a bowl of water and an old brush. You can also use cocktail sticks for the scratches, and then it was just a matter of doing a little bit of chipping here and there. As you can see, it's not a great deal, and what is there will probably get covered up with all the weathering as well. And obviously at the same time as the lower hull was done, the upper hull has been done in a similar fashion. So what we now need to do is to start doing some detailed painting. This will involve obviously the radios, or the speakers, all the wiring. Here we've got all the grenades to do, and again some of the transmission additions there as well. Anything that's tight here, feel free to use the Tamiya tape for masking, just to protect any paintwork from stray paint while doing the detail painting. But I'll get all of that done, and then I'll go through the colours, so you'll know for your own project. All the fine detailing has been done now, so let's just run through a few colours with you. This is dark rubber. The foot pedals done in exhaust manifold, which are the metal colours from Vallejo. The small units here, they're done in steel and exhaust manifold. The blue flooring, you can't quite see it, but that's been given a dry brush with steel as well as black. That's really darkened that blue down lovely now. All the wiring is in black. The top of the shells are brass, and then we have Panzer grey, old wood, and Feldgrau, which is the German grey, for the top of the grenades. Oh, and the back here, again, that was just the metallic paints with a wash of black around the outside. So that's that particular part. And then for here, the radios still need finishing off, but again they're anthracite grey. The speakers, etc., again done with the metal colours of steel and exhaust manifold. German grey, Feldgrau for the canister, black, again wiring black. The end of the speaker hose is dark rubber. This particular section's here, that's all black with a little bit of silver. For the lenses, I'll be amazed if you can see any of this when it's put back together again. So that's pretty well much it now. I don't know how well you can see, but there's a few little specks all the way around. Layering is the process whereby you build up different layers of texture using different types of mediums, so whether it's paint, oil paint, acrylics, whether it's pigments, anything like that, and that way that creates depth in your model, and sort of shows an accumulation of dirt and grease and weathering over a period of time, rather than something that's just happened straight away. So for me, the first part of the layering process, as I've shown you, is a little bit of speckling just to break up the monotony of the off-white colour. What will happen now is this will all receive a coat of matte varnish, and I use Winsor Newton Galleria. And then once that's dry, what I'll do is that I'll use some dried pigments, particularly around the floor area, get that all black and start to look dark, and then what I'll also do is try and add some earth tones around here as well. I'm not actually aiming to create any sort of texture, but just staining, and then once that's done, I'll add another layer of matte varnish, and then we can start looking at doing some oil work. So with the fine detailing now complete, and the first part of the layering system done. What we're now going to do is add on the decals. So everything's going to be given a coat of a gloss varnish and let that dry, and then what we're going to do is add on the German tank interior wording for each part of the interior of the Stug. So I'm going to have fun and games trying to do some translations, and I'll come back to you with the final results. With the first coat of matte varnish now dry, we're going to add on another layer of colour, and here we're going to actually use some pigments. What I'm after here is to create stains rather than actual texture. We're going to be using dark colours down in the front of the Stug. Now with black, whatever it touches it will stain, so be very careful. And what we need to do is just use an old brush, and then we can just get down into the recesses, and as you can see already, that's staining that nicely. And that's all we need to do, is just to create little bits of stain, a little bit of another layer of colouring, and then once I've done all of that, that will all then be coated again with a final coat of matte varnish, and then I'll be able to start on the oil work. So to finish off, let's have a look at all the other components. Obviously this is the main gun. Particularly pleased with the way the basket came out. That was done with light brown, with a dark brown wash, also along with a can brown, and then a light brown dry brush at the end. The optics, or the telescope part, whichever you like to call it, that was done in burnt iron with a black wash, and you'll also see there's a little bit of fine detailing there with the silver, and the, sorry, not the silver, the steel, and the steel was carried on with the wiring there, and also on the other side here. Inside, the main breech was done with burnt iron, and also the loading breech was done in steel, and you can also see the brass plaques there as well. So very pleased with that, that's come out well. Looking at the gear brake system and also the transmission box, very straightforward. Decided to break up the colour there by using green at the front, and obviously the aged white for the rear, black for the handle, and obviously burnt iron for the springs. So that's all very straightforward. The actual gear brakes themselves, I'm going to leave that in the red primer colour because I think that's quite effective. I've done some accessories as well, just to put in and around the floor area, So that's very straightforward, usual German colours there. And also I've decided just to do a gas canister in the winter whitewash as well, just to add a bit of fun to the interior. The instrument panel, that came out particularly well, as you can see. For the eagle-eyed ones amongst you, the actual dials are from a Spitfire, but I think for one you're probably not going to really see much of it anyway, but if you do catch a glimpse I think that's still going to look quite effective. And again, some chipping and some other work underneath there as well, as you can see. All the leather work was done in black, and then I just mixed a little bit of light grey with the black, and then did a dry brush to get a little bit of texture, and that's come out particularly well on the driver's chair, which was where the piping was done in medium grey. I'm really pleased how that's turned out. The actual ammo box is going to be left as is, but obviously heavily chipped, and that should look quite nice once weathered up. And the telescopic sights, that was done in German green Feldgrau, and again very pleased with the way that's gone. So that's all the components done. As with the main area, it will be given a coat of matte varnish, and once dry another coat will be added, and then we can start on the weathering, which will include oil work and pigments. So it just leaves me to say thanks very much again for your continued support of my work, and I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial as much as what I did putting it together, and I look forward to seeing you on the final tutorial, where, like I say, we'll do all the weathering. Happy modelling!